Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. We're really excited. We have a lot of coverage to give to you today. We have some very esteemed panelists, as you can see there from the slide and from their names. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through, as we go through each one, I'll introduce them and let you know what their background is. My name is Cynthia Lieberman. I'm a content marketing and media strategist, and I'm the moderator today. And thank you very much for coming. So I'd like to just get going, if that's okay with you. We're going to start with Nicholas Lungano, who is a principal at a New York-based Kaleidoscope Technologies, and he's a leading entrepreneur and brand innovator with almost 30 years of experience in launching successful brand and startup companies. He has led the groundbreaking launches in VR and AR and 360 videos and beverages, cosmetics, video game, mobile apps, OTT, has a lot of experience. But AOL and Verizon identified him as a top thought leader in virtual reality and augmented reality. And with 10 plus years under his belt, building content for VR and AR and mobile platforms, including top worldwide franchises, including Diablo, World of Warcraft, StarCraft, and more, and he brings a kaleidoscope of experience as a brand marketer in this space. So we're going to let him start with his presentation, and we'll go from there. So we are up to the real facts about VR.
Thank you. This is always the toughest crowd because it's the post-lunch on the last day before Memorial Day, so thanks for coming. We're going to act as mythbusters for the next couple of slides and basically talk a little bit about virtual reality and some of the myths that are out there and really cut through a bit of the confusion. And I think a lot of this also applies not just to VR but also to augmented reality or mixed reality as well. And the first of those is that virtual reality will never work. Well, we have at our disposal today one of the most powerful mediums that has come to any generation, even more powerful than television. If you take a look at any of the statistics, the metrics, the diagnostics, based on the effectiveness of any type of campaigns that are run through virtual reality, then even as Nielsen published back in December of last year, it is by far the most powerful and most effective medium because you have an audience that is completely engaged and engrossed in your brand. So there is no more powerful. And then when you consider that some of the largest companies in the world are investing and creating virtual reality and augmented reality solutions, platforms, and applications, it is inevitable that virtual reality, whether it's in its present state or a different state in a year from now or 2 years from now, it will be a major platform or medium for brands as well as business applications. I can't even read that.
VR only gamers and millennials.
I do need glasses. So virtual reality, I've heard this a number of times, and a lot of this comes out of meetings that we've had and feedback from potential clients, questions that arise, that virtual reality, for instance, is a platform for millennials or for gamers. Well, I've made a lot of games in my career, but I've never seen a platform come across that really cuts through demographics like virtual reality does. And it appeals as much to millennials as it does to baby boomers. When you take a look at the affinity scores, people are interested in this platform. And ask yourself, would New York Times be making an enormous investment in virtual reality? And they're not millennials in terms of their audiences. It is a very effective platform. It works.
Too expensive.
Too expensive, yes. I always ask people, well, it depends on who the client is, to remove a zero from the numbers. But virtual reality, and I'll give you an example. I can make a virtual reality game for a few $100,000. That's a game, fully interactive. So the fact or the notion that virtual reality is expensive is incorrect. You probably spend more money making or production on television commercial or television spot, far more expensive than creating virtual reality experiences. Well, it is, as far as we're concerned, with our clients.
You have to have a headset.
Yes, this is another. A lot of people chase numbers and installed bases. That's great if you're making games for PlayStation 4 or for Xbox, but it's not the case with virtual reality. These platforms or these solutions can work on all existing smartphones or tablets, which means the audience for virtual reality is not 6 million. The virtual reality audience is in the billions. Why? Because it works natively on your through an app or as a browser experience on your mobile device. So you ask yourself, well, isn't the headset a better experience? Absolutely. However, you've got billions of people that carry around smartphones, and if virtual reality can engage them, because this is all about audience engagement, it takes a lot to get someone's attention. And what virtual reality does is it cuts out all the distractions and you have the attention of your audience. So if you can deliver a video in a VR format on a device and they can turn around in full 360 in all its glory and experience your product or your brand, you're going to have a much greater effectiveness, recall, and hopefully purchase intent as well, which again, Nielsen has already shown that that is the case. And then my final myth. No, is this my final myth?
Yeah,
this is my final myth.
Versatile.
These are my slides, and I can't even remember my own slides, right? Go figure. So this is part of the aging process. Virtual reality can't help me there.
This is about the versatility.
Yeah, so the versatility of VR, you know, as people are thinking through virtual reality, or even augmented reality for that matter, it's not just about consumer activation, B2C. The applications that we make or we've experienced or created for clients extend far beyond just reaching a consumer. It's not just about generating millions of dollars for clients in terms of revenues, but it's also about saving millions of dollars in productivity by using this great device which has tremendous utility across all the different. Do you want to read those out for me?
Yeah, marketing activation, retail, trade shows, testing, research, planogramming, personnel training, healthcare, education, entertainment,
And it's not limited to just that, but also with real estate. And this is actually a case study. We have a real estate client that is selling homes, custom homes to clients. Each custom home costs around $300,000 or $400,000 to build, the physical property. And you only then have one rendition of that home, whereas we know that home could be customized and it requires multiple renditions or versions. Well, what we did with virtual reality, that is not a real kitchen, that is virtual reality. So if I had my headset on, I would be walking through the kitchen, walking through the entire house, interacting with the appliances, everything. It makes you feel like you're actually in the home. So all of a sudden, the cost of building a model home goes from $300,000 to $400,000 to only about 5% of that. And of course, then at the touch or a glance, a consumer can change the settings, they can change the appliances, they can look at different flooring, you name it. It is limitless in terms of the applications here. And then the next example, again in VR, this is augmented reality. And this is an app that we created, we have this technology as well, where imagine you go past a house and you see the for sale sign. Now I can put my phone up and I can actually see all the rooms in that house. I can get all the details about the pricing of the home, the square footage, and if I lift my phone and go to the second floor, it gives me a second floor view as well. There are the bedrooms, etc. And I can literally walk through the home. And then the value of this to the real estate brokers is when I signed up for the app and downloaded it, just like you do with Uber, I had to put in my email address and my phone number. Now we have a qualified lead that we send out to all the real estate brokers out there that represent this property. It is immensely valuable tool. That's VR and AR.
So from there, is anybody here in the real estate field? Just out of curiosity. It's definitely a growth business. There's a lot of other businesses here. We're going to cover different topics. And so we're going to move on now to, thank you, Nicholas, for that. We're going to move on to John Simon. He's the VP of Integrated Marketing at Eisenberg. Did I say that right? Eisenberg. You said that earlier, too. Eisenberg cut his teeth in entertainment almost 2 decades ago at Sony Pictures when they were the first studio to break the $1 billion mark, and has since been supporting integrated marketing efforts on the agency side, helping brands create and share their stories with consumers across all mediums. His efforts are infused into brands ranging from Amazon, Chrysler, Cirque du Soleil, Oculus, and Sony, amongst others. And at Eisenberg, John is helping lead the agency's growth and expertise in virtual reality, from developing opportunities to tell stories within this exciting new platform, while also championing veteran and startup companies in VR to help them create and share their stories with the new generation of consumers. So what John's going to do is present a brief PlayStation VR project clip for your viewing pleasure, and then take the mic to share insights on creative approaches on using VR in innovative integrated marketing campaigns. So you want me to show the video first?
Sure, yeah, we can
All
let it
right.
play.
Little tease video here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Adam, also known as CNanners, and PlayStation recently invited me out to Hollywood, California to play Batman Arkham on the PSVR. I want to thank PlayStation for sponsoring this video and building an entire Batman themed set. No joke, they actually built like a movie quality set inside a huge soundstage to essentially provide me with the most immersive VR experience. And let me tell you, this is hands down, in the 7 years I've been doing this, the coolest gameplay event that I have ever participated in. It's so much fun. Like, I had such a good time. Really looking forward to the other games, London Heist, Resident Evil 7. Batman Arkham is amazing. I had such a fun time pretending essentially I was the Batman. And like always, if you'd like to learn more, please do look down in the description down below. And if you haven't already strapped down your Batman hockey pads, grab them things. You know what time it is.
Yeah, it's Batman Justice time! Hello?
This is spooky.
Where'd I go? Don't know where I should be right now. There's no one here but me. And you. One moment, please. Late as usual, sir.
Oh, my apologies.
In future, do feel free to let yourself in.
But of course.
How are you?
Hello, everyone. My name is Adam.
Pause that. There we go. That's just a tease. I'm sure he can tell you where you can find the whole thing.
Yeah,
but
no, absolutely. So, thank you for that, Cynthia.
Thank you.
And thanks, Nick. You actually hit on a few points that I think are relevant to even the story that I wanted to kind of share with the group here with respect to virtual reality. I know we've seen a lot throughout the week, applications and platforms and different ways that we can see what virtual reality looks like inside the experience. I think for what I wanted to bring to the discussion was really the thinking of how virtual reality as a platform, and as Nick said, it's very much an immersive platform in which you can feel much more about the story that a brand has to tell you. So, I personally have always kind of adopted a Simon Sinek theory of start with why. And if you haven't seen that, I definitely recommend you go check that out. But a lot of virtual reality, I know at least a lot of the conversations we have with clients have very much been as like, okay, what are we going to do in virtual reality? Where I feel we really need to be starting to think about why are we telling our story in virtual reality, and why should this brand leverage this platform as a medium in which they can share their story and how they're going to connect with consumers. So the example here I think is relevant in the fact that we think very much about content and platforms and experiences as forms of influence. Our brands have influence upon our consumers. The way that consumers are really interacting with brands today, much different than historical advertising has allowed us. Before it was about what it is and where do I get it. Now, I think our consumers are having a much stronger relationship with their brands, and especially when we start thinking about the millennial market. They're interacting with brands in a completely different way. What virtual reality allows us to do is to be able to get those consumers to really step inside the world and have a visceral response to it. So I think the first question of why is one of the main takeaways I would say is something we really want to think about here. The second, as I mentioned with influence, is what's the, again, you're going to look at virtual reality as an advertising platform, but I think you also want to think about what you're wrapping all around that, because we do run the challenges of the limitation of headsets or the awareness that people know that they could have perhaps a less immersive experience, but still a virtual reality experience through a mobile device. But once you get into the layer of headsets, we haven't quite crossed that chasm yet. I think a lot of people anticipate this holiday will help to push that. I know there's a few players in the market who still haven't kind of shown their cards, like the Apples of the world, but I know a lot of us can predict where that will go. But when we get to the point where it is the established platform that people have and we have a new channel in which we can distribute content through, it really is how this is going to fit into our overall story and our overall relationship, be it a campaign or be it just any way we want to tell our story for our brands. So this example here was what we had helped support along with Sony and a handful of other agencies as well for the launch of the PlayStation VR. And as many of you are probably familiar with the Batman Arkham experience, the relevance here, I think, is really the wrapper we had around it. As I like to think, there's always the actual reality that sits outside of the virtual reality. And in this experience, being able to create that real world story that we could then take and share across mediums is great. And Adam, who goes by Sea Nanners, you know, he's a perfect example of where you would want to think about where influencer marketing can be more effective with you. I know at Eisenberg, we'll look at all different tiers of influencers, all the way down to followers who people might only have 500 followers. It might be the right person to connect with the audience we're trying to get to. Adam actually carried a wide reach, and I think that was a lot aligned with what PlayStation was looking to do. Having 5 million followers, and I think his channel alone has already garnered over 2 billion views. So thinking about that as a part of the whole marketing story, I think is definitely significant. And the last thing I brought up earlier is relevance. Is again, virtual reality is a very unique platform, and it allows a lot of opportunity for you to be able to step in and interact with your experience, whether it's a lean back experience like 360 video and a lot of the content that we've seen there, or it's a lean in experience where you can actually interact and engage. That's where the VR, AR, MR play comes into play here, and I think it's something important for us to think about. The last thing that I would really want to walk away with is thinking about, again, you know, the play that virtual reality makes as far as from a content platform, but as well as a marketing platform. That a lot of people have been looking at creating an application and then putting it up and seeing how it engages. And I know a lot of brands will often bring into that conversation, how can we monetize it? I think that you still want to think about, especially whether you're on the marketing side or you're on the content side or you're on the brand side, you want to think about how you want to leverage VR as a part of your business. And I think a lot of people are looking at this as a new channel, and I think it's a great way to look at it. If you think about how our storytelling and advertising has gone through the decades, you know, we evolved from paper to radio to a 2D screen to 3D to activations in live real world space. Virtual reality to me is this additional screen. It's a lens in which you are able to see and experience your story. But at the end of the day, it all comes back down to the story. And I think that's very much at Iceberg what we think about is creating and sharing brand stories with audiences, and how do we make those authentic connections. That's where we look at virtual reality strategically as to when it's going to be the right platform for us to use. So I know a lot of people out there right now are asking the question of how do I get into virtual reality? If there's one thing I'd say we could walk away with today is, why should I get into virtual reality?
Yeah, I think the relevance is a very big key, and storytelling is a big key, because content is king and context is queen, and they need to be married together. So you don't want to just force it onto somebody. And that's why each of these different guests are bringing different types of avenues where you can do it, but you don't put something that doesn't fit into the wrong space. And so from that, we're going to move to Vince Cacace, I'm sorry, Vince Cacace. He's the founder and CEO of Vertebrae, and it's a Santa Monica-based technology company located, like I said, in Santa Monica, and it focuses on connecting virtual reality audiences with brands and advertisers through its VR advertising platform. Vince has an analytics and business intelligence background from General Motors and co-founded Hit Doctor Records. Vince is most passionate about empowering creativity through technology and innovation, and was recently named to Forbes 30 and 30 in marketing and advertising. Do you want to show the video first, or do you want to speak first?
I guess I'll speak first, just
Okay.
to kind of set the pace for it. So, and thank you for the introduction. So, hi everybody, my name is Vince, and Vertebrae is a VR advertising platform, and really the problem that we're trying to solve is that, you know, this panel is on brands and advertisers and how do they look at VR, and really we kind of look at it from a technology perspective and say, okay, you know, across this nascent industry with these fragmented audiences that live and on all these different hardware platforms, you know, whether that is Samsung Gear, Google Daydream, Google Cardboard, or some of the more PC-based or console-based platforms like PlayStation VR, Oculus Rift, HTC Vive. So you have this wide proliferation of platforms out there, and then relatively small audiences. It's growing quickly, but small audiences across each platform. And on those platforms, they're doing different things. They're consuming different types of experiences and games and cinematic VR content. And so, you know, what we do is, instead of, you know, when a brand wants to have, makes a VR experience and it has a singular distribution endpoint, what we do is we help to maximize and extend the reach of that content as far as possible across the VR ecosystem and even into web and mobile. And so what I'm going to show today, I guess now would be kind of a good time to play the video. So this is a Dallas Mavericks 360 video campaign, and I'll talk through a couple of the uses after, but just so you can get a feel for the type of content.
Oh, I went to the wrong slide. Wait. Wrong. This one. There we go.
And obviously it doesn't look as good out of headset.
In his 19th season, the Big Daddy tall baller from the Chief, number 41, the circle short, rebound comes to Dirk at the elbow, good! With 2.8 seconds remaining.
So I just wanted to use that as an example, and obviously with VR, you really do have to see it kind of in the headset, or at least in a format that that makes more sense than that right there. But really, the concept that one powerful concept of VR in general is this notion of presence, which tricks your brain into believing that you've been teleported to another place, right? And that is really what we get excited about from a storytelling perspective, right? And we don't really differentiate between brands telling stories or content creators telling stories, right? It's still storytelling at the end of the day. And to John's point a second ago, we moved in the evolution of media. If you think about that from an advertising perspective, we have the display or the banner ad from 19th century newspapers, or the 2D video ad, which is reminiscent of the dawn of broadcast television. And so what's really exciting to us about VR and AR is the concept of building brand experiences that don't fit into a box. And what does that mean from both a storytelling and a technology distribution perspective to show that to the user in a way that's native and contextual? And really our goal is to create a win-win ecosystem where you have really kind of fun and creative and compelling ads that are fueling the monetization of content in a way that is really effective for the advertiser, for the publisher, and the consumer enjoys at the end of the day. So that's kind of our goal and our mission, and with this specific example with the Dallas Mavericks, what I wanted to showcase here is that this was to sell season tickets. So this wasn't just a brand advertiser, brand engagement style campaign where it's Coca-Cola and the message is drink Coke, and then you come away from that and you say, okay, maybe I'll go drink a Coke, but Coke has no way to really show, okay, did this convert to whatever I was trying to convert to? So those are two different types of advertising, but in this one it was a direct response in that we could directly correlate this to how many people bought tickets to the Mavericks after they saw this. And so it ran both across our network in headset, so across different virtual reality apps and platforms, and then also into web and mobile. And what I mean by web and mobile is essentially a magic window view. So you kind of move your phone around and you can see a little window into that 360 video. And so for those specific requirements, the Mavericks wanted this to run against a sports audience, primarily in the Dallas area. And so that was where we could go out and build that audience in web and mobile. And then in VR, it was more just of a kind of anywhere we could put it sort of thing. But I thought that was kind of an interesting use case because fan experience stuff is really cool. You're in the locker room with the players, you're on the court. It really has that cool notion of presence. But then at the end of the day, the campaign was to, was ultimately to sell tickets, and then, the amount of money that they spent on it comparative to their traditional video ads, you could just see a huge spike in the conversion, with a small increase, in the cost, both of the production and the ad serving. So, thank you.
Thank you, Vince. I think that really goes to for what the first two panelists were also speaking about, that for example, in the real estate market, the end goal is to get people to buy houses, right? But if they get to experience, it's very experiential, but it's not about the excitement of the game, it's about solving a problem and giving a solution that you can experience firsthand. And of course, or getting the brand, to get people to embrace the brand. Batman's a big brand, and there's a lot of people who follow it, and you have a cult following who wants that experience, that physical experience that they can tell other people about and become brand ambassadors. So sports is obviously one of those where you get that experience and you get really excited about it, and at the same time, it inspires you maybe to go and actually feel it firsthand. So going from this, then, we're going to transfer over to Chuck Peel. Peel? Is that how you say your first name?
Peel.
I don't know. You're just Chuck to me.
It's easier than your last name.
Yes. So Chuck he's a real veteran. He has done a lot of things in this industry. He's one of the founding members of RealFX, which has 300 plus employees in Dallas and Santa Monica, and he's a respected leader and innovator in the entertainment space with over 50 projects to his credit and theatrical location based in the VR space. Lionsgate, JCPenney's, AT&T, Samsung. He's done a lot of interesting things. And in this particular case, sticking with the sports theme, but from a different perspective, a different experiential perspective, he's going to address brands in VR and location-based entertainment integration for a brand with a physical presence and interactivity with a campaign that has gotten over 1 billion views. So Chuck, I'll let you take it over.
Okay.
Go to the first slide.
If we can go to the first slide. Thanks for joining us here today. Our path to VR, like many, we just stumbled into it when it was a Kickstarter campaign. Basically, we got our first Oculus headset when it was very clunky and very fidgety. But for us, it was a natural progression of what we designed our studio for. We started in the advertising commercial business 22 years ago, and we still maintain a presence in that. So advertising, working with brands to create content around their brands in the traditional formats of 30-second spots is how we cut our teeth. We then transitioned into entertainment and started doing movies of the week for some of the studios, and then ultimately animated direct-to-videos, and then that led us to our own features. I don't know if anybody saw a movie called The Book of Life, an animated feature. That was our film that we co-produced. As we came around the horn and we're doing advertising, we're doing studio production films for other studios and doing our own content, VR came on. So we looked at it as just an extension of a storytelling tool, another way to be able to extend the experience, be it a brand or be it a big studio film, into VR. And that was always the way we looked at it. A couple of the panelists already commented on the importance of it as a storytelling tool. And that's originally how we got involved in it. So our first VR experience was Pacific Rim for Comic-Con a few years ago. That was a Hail Mary experience. Nobody had ever done a big experience with a studio thing for Comic-Con with literally less than a month, and it was crazy to get it done. But we threw it out there, and it was well received. But what we learned in that was that the physical presence and the physical activation itself was every bit as important in the experience as what was in the goggles. And that's what I want to hit today. This is only one path, is that on our journey, we started to do theme park installations as well. We did the Universal Studios, Despicable Me ride. I don't know if you've been on that ride. So Despicable Me, Simpsons ride, all these theme park rides. And if you think about it, theme park rides and big experiential things in theme parks is really VR. It's a big 360 experiential piece of content. Yeah, you happen to be experiencing it in a motion seat with a bunch of other people. But we didn't know that yet, but we did later. And so when we started to look at the importance of the physical activation, it's the thing that we as a studio have been pushing and engaging our brands with, is to say, think about the physical, think about the reality as much as the virtual. I think I'm stealing your line there. But the idea was those two things, especially now, are super important in bridging the adoption rate. Some people just don't get VR, some people do. But what's the importance of having something physical to be able to extend the experience? So here's a little line, every brand has a story. Traditionally, that story is presented from the outside in. And VR changes that perspective because really this is an idea of saying everything on the outside, an advertisement, a 30-second spot, a commercial, the traditional ways for a brand to reach their audience is from the outside, from you, the marketer, the brand, content company, to the individual. And the idea of VR is that you have a captured audience. I think Nicholas mentioned it. It's like you've got them in a headset. This is a way to expand that experience and experience the brand from the inside out. So how do you do that? If you want to go to the next one. An example that we did, we've done a lot of other activations. We did Pacific Rim, as I said. We did Power Rangers. We did the Air Force that tours. All of these had some sort of physical activation around it. And this one in particular, 2 years ago, was done for American Express. American Express needed to be on brand. They had all their VIP, card holders that they love to provide special experiences like concerts, et cetera. So the idea was, what do we do at the U.S. Open? We worked with the agency and said, well, why don't you go up against a really badass, tennis player and see if you can return a serve? And that's how this was all born. So the idea was, how do you play against Maria Sharapova, and how do you create the experience? So I'm going to play a real quick video clip so you'll see. Now this is, what's funny is we can all say, VR is moving in dog years, at 7 years at a clip. Anything we say today is going to be wrong tomorrow, so you can call us on it, but that's the beauty of this, is it's being invented as we go. So even some of the technology here, just 2 years old, has advanced way past what we tried here with the American Express piece, okay?
2015 was a big year for virtual reality, but for American Express, it wasn't enough to make another passive VR experience you sat and watched. For over 20 years, we've helped bring fans at the US Open Tennis Championships closer to the action. And this year, we took it even further by actually putting them in the action, with the first ever virtual reality that let you go head-to-head against a professional athlete. You versus Sharapova. This fully immersive experience put a tennis racket in your hand, put you on a court you can really move around in.
Nice, right?
And tested your skills against a tennis superstar. You versus Sharapova is the first true blend of live-action videos, CGI, and the ability to fully move around inside a virtual world as you moved in the real one. We laser scanned and motion captured Maria Sharapova in 360 degrees, composed binaural audio sound, and recorded over 50 responses.
That was a lot of fun.
And built custom software that would accurately reflect the ball's speed and angle of return.
For the fans that don't have a chance to play against me, this will be pretty close to real life.
And it was. Our haptic controller was weighted to feel like a racket and responded to your every move, as sensors translated your every swing, step, jump, and lunge into virtual reality. Maria started by hitting some shots to get you warmed up. Then it was time for the real challenge. Can you return Maria Sharapova's famous serve? For most, the answer was, of course not, but they sure had fun trying. At the US Open American Express fan experience, 8,000 visitors got to play You versus Sharapova. And it reached far beyond its on-site footprint, generating lots of love from the tech world and social media, driving over 1 billion earned media impressions worldwide, and even making an impression on Bill Gates, who tweeted his approval to his 26 million followers.
Did I talk too soon? Sorry.
So that's, that was a big activation, and there was a lot of effort put into it. I can't talk about the next one we're doing with them, but it was the first thing that Vive did in that type of a footprint. We're doing another one for American Express with the sports thing. But I think the perspective that I want to provide is that anything that can break that physical space for the guest that is experiencing something is super important. There's a group that did a really cool spot for The Wire. Did anybody try this VR experience? The movie where you walk between the Twin Towers? So they sat there with a little box fan, pretty simple, and they had a little platform, and it had a tiny little rope going down the middle and another platform. You had to take your shoes off, and you got on top of the platform, and you got to walk on a wire, the tightrope between the two Twin Towers. I'm telling you, I couldn't do it. I was absolutely 100% convinced that when my foot touched that little piece of rope, I couldn't do it. Everybody, and he told me later, he goes, don't worry, about 50% of the people can't do it. And then they blew a fan on you, really simple. But my point is, what happened in that moment was the VR experience itself was super cool, but something as simple as a physical haptics device. I was thinking about the experience of going into a house. I wonder if adding the smell of chocolate chip cookies would increase the sell rate or something. So my theme, the theme in mind is that there's all kinds of great ways to experience VR, AR, and content. But it's an ecosystem. There's other elements to it. You don't have to go all in on one thing. You can still use traditional ways of reaching your audience with traditional physical experiences tied to VR that impact the guests and stay on point with whatever the message for the brand is. U.S. Air Force, we toured an entire 18-wheeler with a big airplane around, and there was other elements that were tied to it. VR was only one part of it. But it's important to say, what's the story, what's the brand identity, and how do you communicate that in content, much like anything else. If you're just doing VR to do VR, it's cool, but it's not going to have the effect you want. So.
Thanks, Chuck. That was great. Very interesting. I'm sure I couldn't meet that serve virtually or in reality. So the next person, going to a different kind of perspective, more is entertainment, but with a twist for sure, is Todd Hooper, who's the founder and CEO of VReal, the first live streaming platform for VR games, connecting developers, streamers, and spectators on any VR headset or 2D screen. And prior to VReal, Todd was VP of Online Services at Unity, leading their project initiatives to revolutionize the way that games developers create and connect an audience. And he's here to talk about the future of live streaming video games in VR. So do you want to show the clip, or did you want to do a little setup first?
Let me do some setup first.
Okay, sure.
Thanks, Cynthia. Hi, everyone. I'm Todd. It's great to be here. VReal is really kind of at the intersection of two trends right now. I guess as Cynthia mentioned, I was previously at Unity, which is the technology that's used to create probably 70-80% of the VR content that you see. I saw an early look at the Vive, and when I really put that headset on in 2014, it was very, very clear to me that this is the future of gaming. Gaming is a $100 billion market split between PC, console, mobile, and virtual reality is something that gamers have been dreaming about, reading about in books and seeing on science fiction movies for 20, 30 years, even since I was a kid, surely. Beyond that, we're going to get there. Nicholas, it was nice to hear someone being very positive about VR. There was an earlier session from the VCs where people were kind of negative on VR. It just requires some patience. It's not going to be something that happens overnight. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen next week. Over the 3 to 5 year time frame is where I see, especially in the game space, that VR can become a multi-billion-dollar industry. We've done hundreds of demos to people in our office, gamers and non-gamers alike. Nobody comes away from it saying, yeah, that was just cool. Normally you have to fight to get the headset off them. So one of the sort of core tenets of VReal is that a big chunk of the gaming space is going to go to VR in the 5 year time frame. The other angle is that in the last 5 years, gaming has gone from something that used to be a solitary experience to becoming a media franchise. It used to be that I went home and just played a game, and that was my, identified as a gamer. I played a game maybe with myself or with friends. Now, the majority of gamers actually go home and they consume content from Twitch and YouTube that is influencers playing games. They're watching other people play games. In fact, at any time, any moment, there are more people watching games than playing games now. And that's very generational. If you talk to anyone that's over 30, they just flat out don't understand that. But there's a generation of younger people, typically 15 to 25, that have disconnected from traditional media, and they watch Twitch and they watch YouTube. They watch influencers like PewDiePie. They watch Jericho and Lyric and people that you may not have heard of if you don't follow the space. And they'll consume up to 2 hours of that content every night. So if you're a brand and you're trying to reach that market with a gaming product, an entertainment product, lifestyle, good luck putting it on TV, because they're not watching TV. They are watching. This is why Amazon paid $1 billion for Twitch, by the way. A lot of people didn't understand that, but the average Twitch user is consuming up to 2 hours of that a night. So all of that is based around an assumption that games are a flat thing on the screen in front of you. And of course, if games are going to move to VR, then there's going to be a new kind of streaming, and that's really what we're working on. Having said that, we also want to be able to reach, we want to create that bridge that we were talking about earlier to the existing consumers. Many consumers obviously know about VR. They don't have headsets yet. So what I'm going to show you, this is a show that was actually pitched to us by a Twitch studio that's here in Burbank. A very small studio, run on a very small budget. Definitely doesn't have the budget of the work that you guys do, Chuck. And we showed them a game that we'd set up virtual cameras in so they could film with like a camera team inside this game. And he came back and pitched me. He said, I want to make a comedy talent show around virtual surgeons. The game's called Surgeon Simulator. And it just finished a 12-week season. This was sponsored by a couple of brands that stepped in as sponsors. And yeah, well, let's run the video and you'll get a look at it. It's pretty funny.
Oops, wrong slide, sorry. Trying to get it to play. Oh, it doesn't.
This is actually ERVR. It's a virgin. I almost said Virgin Simulator.
Yeah, Virgin Simulator.
Diffie show.
Yeah, you know, we keep it swift. You did it twice, you did it nice, and your hair's not filled with lice.
You took out a soul and injected the soul into the universe. Go now, do those drugs!
So yeah, that was made on a bare bones budget by a very small team. But basically, they just had the player sitting in the room, and all of the video content you saw was actually filmed by a team in VR. Now, the audience loved it. We had 2,000 people watching the premiere live, which is pretty big for a small Twitch channel. And interestingly, we did a survey of that gamer audience and asked, how many of you intend to purchase a VR product in the next 12 months? And it was nearly 30%, it was like 28 point something percent. So in that demographic of gamers and people that are excited about this technology, the intent to purchase is very, very high. Now in the future, that will be an experience that you can watch on your 2D screen, whether it's on your phone or on your TV, but you'll also be able to put a headset on with VReal and actually enjoy that experience in full VR as well. So that's the kind of future that we're working towards. I see that mobile gaming is probably the biggest thing that we've had in gaming in the last 10 years, and VR is definitely the next big platform, and to hell with the skeptics.
Yeah, I think we're going to transition now to some degree to more back to mobile and to 360 with Christine. But one of the important things is that these 18 to 24-year-olds that were early adopters are now becoming embedded adopters, and they have disposable income. And this is very attractive to advertisers. So as this business matures, you're going to find more and more of that adoption spreading across different platforms, and especially as it becomes more easy to use in the mobile market. And our next guest, our next panelist, I should say, is Christine Lee, and she's the Global VP of Business Development at Immersive. And Immersive is an early stage company that has built a platform for mobile virtual reality and mobile 360 to serve content developers. The Immersive network provides Google Cardboard and Mobile 360 developers an opportunity for distribution and monetization. Most recently, Christine was the general manager at Chartboost, managing sales, business development, partnerships, and account management. Previously, she managed entertainment and games at AdMob and continued to work with both console and mobile game developers. So in this particular instance, Christine is bringing a whole nother business that is really a big business like real estate. She is, as you can imagine, travel in VR and 360 is a compelling medium, the best way to have potential tourists get a taste of their vacation through virtual reality. So Christine will walk through a case study of how they helped Hawaii tourism market to potential customers and tourists. So you think Dallas and Mavericks, now we're going to go into tourism about how you get people to get excited about it.
Awesome, thank you. That was a long intro, sorry about that.
Okay.
All right, so I'm Christine Lee, I'm with Immersive. Immersive is a VR 360 ad platform. So we help content creators and VR developers with monetization via in-app VR advertising, and we also help with advertisers and brands and agencies with distribution and marketing. Today we'll talk about a case study that we did with OMD and Hawaii Tourism. But before we get into the numbers, I just want to take a step back and kind of think about tourism and VR. It's actually a really special fit in that when you travel, you're either physically present or you're seeing photos or videos, and photos and videos don't do it justice, right? This is the first time that people could fully travel virtually and experience something without being there. So it's a very powerful medium. With that, advertising in VR is extremely powerful. It's the first time that a brand could fully surround a potential customer, right? It's the first time that you could be in headset and fully send that message. So with that, we wanted to put that to the test and actually see, is VR advertising that much more powerful or perform that much better? And of course, with our results, we see that it did. So we'll dive into this now. So with this specific case, this was, again, OMD, a big agency in Hawaii Tourism. They had a very cool video that we'll show afterwards where they're really showing, what it's like to be in the Hawaiian waterfalls and in the volcanoes. And then, of course, driving installs to their Hawaii VR app. So they ran this across our network, and this was across games content, travel content, entertainment content. It went for about 5 weeks. We hit over 50,000 users that were actually in headset. And we saw a 70% video completion rate. So just to give you some benchmarks there, on mobile and on desktop, if anybody here has worked in ads or bought ads, that's really high. Mobile and desktop is typically 20 to 30% for non-rewarded. So 70% is really strong. The next thing, which is kind of funny, is that in headset, you can't click on anything, so we call it a gaze. Like, that's the actual click. So in mobile speak, it's CTR, click-through rate. In VR speak, it's gaze-through rate. So we saw about a 25% gaze-through rate. Now in mobile, coming from Unity, coming from Chartboost, we saw 1% maybe for click-through rates, maybe on mobile web a little higher, but that is, 25 times more than what we've seen on other platforms. In terms of install rates, and I'll say this more broadly across the network, we're seeing for app installs that are VR and 360 about 1 to 20% install rates. That's crazy. That's 1 out of 5 people are actually installing an app. Again, in mobile, we're seeing about sub 1%. So just in this kind of early time frame, we're already seeing that the engagement in VR is so much higher than other platforms. And it's not just a novelty thing either. Our company has been around for 2 years, and we've been live for over a year. And actually the performance since we've launched has gone up. So the view-through rates, the click-through rate, or the gaze-through rates, and the install rates have actually increased. So it's actually really special to see how powerful this medium actually is and how people actually want to stick around and engage with that. So now we could show the video.
Okay. It's coming from YouTube, so hopefully it will.
So much suspense.
While I pull this up, maybe you guys could answer a question, and I'll go see if I can get it off of YouTube for you. So mixed reality is part of it, but most of you spoke about VR and adaptation to mobile. What do you have to shoot differently? Do you always have to do the mobile piece? How do you blend the two together, because there are different mediums in terms of production, and maybe you could just address that while I try to find this clip for her. Whoever wants to, somebody.
I can jump in with a comment of that. I know that a lot of people thought about the differences between VR and AR and MR, this being augmented reality or mixed reality. And to me personally, in 360 as well, I actually kind of look at that as a fourth pillar. I actually see these as completely different platforms. There's a lot of similarity in the fact that, yes, you are at a center point or immersed with the experience kind of wrapped all around you. Different options will let you have different levels of interactivity or how you can engage into it. But I think very few experiences actually overlap all four. 360 is really, to me, the ability to look every direction. So the difference of you sitting at home in your living room, or for those watching us on the live feed right now, sitting and watching a screen, you're sitting forward and you're looking at something within a given space. For everyone else, look all around you. This is virtual reality. Everywhere that you could look, everything that you could interact with is that level. So it's taking it to that next layer. Where MR and AR come into place, a lot of us have hunted Pokemon, and we've gone that direction in the AR, where you can take kind of virtual experiences and overlay them into your environment. The jump to mixed reality, I think, is really about interacting with that space. So many played Pokemon and called it mixed reality, but in reality you could have the Pokemon on the table or on the floor, but it didn't read the table or the floor. That's where mixed comes into play, and I think that's where Microsoft with the HoloLens and the structured devices, and I know there's a lot of work being done with that in the real estate space. As soon as you start to have the virtual digital content interacting with the physical space, that is where you start to get into that mixed reality field. So if you think about it, virtual reality, as much as you are very, some of the challenges and the myths that people first talked about, where you're lost in there and that you're kind of, it's a really solitary experience. What I think is great is, this is where, companies like VReal or people who are starting to socialize that virtual reality experience, that's really the next evolution of VR. And I think while we are all focusing on VR today, I think it's important to understand the delineation and the differences between them.
That's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you very
A lot of
much,
people
John.
would say, John, that the 360 video is barely VR, right? I mean, for gamers, one of the things that gamers look for, gamers, if you hand a gamer a joystick, what's the first thing they do? They push forward to see what, where they can move. They want agency in the world. And because 360 video is limited to generally a single point of view, unless you're going to spin up multiple cameras. So, I tend to think of real VR content is something that's actually rendered real time in a game engine like Unity or Unreal, and I can move around, I have 6 degrees of freedom. And 360 is more a kind of an entertainment experience that has some features of VR, but is not actually, true VR. It's interesting with Microsoft using the mixed reality term, because that's been very big in the last few weeks. People, they're trying to take AR and VR and move it into the MR term. I think that's actually correct. Longer term, it is one set of technologies. Right now, it might be 2 different products, but everyone remembers when the camera and the phone were 2 different products, right? Because they just couldn't combine them physically in the same package. That will go away over the longer term. It'll take us a little while to get there.
So excuse me, I'm going to go ahead and let Christine, I want to try to make sure she gets to show her video. I have it up on my screen. Is there a way for me to transfer, Eric, so that we can show this video from YouTube? I want to be able to play a YouTube video. Yeah. Okay.
We don't have to play.
Yeah, well, if you, if I hit play, you think, can you see it? It's not that. It's my YouTube screen.
We could also just play that one. That was
Okay.
the video that I sent.
It worked at home. Yeah? Okay. Yeah, it doesn't work. That was the problem. I'll try it again. If we can, it's very cool, and I'd very much like to show it because, okay. Let me get to it. There we
It's
go.
okay. You could YouTube it
Okay.
as well.
Okay. All right, well, you can YouTube it. It's immersive, and that's RSV. And if you want to keep talking then a little bit, if you have any more you wanted to add, or we can go, we have just a couple of minutes we have about 5 minutes for a quick Q&A, unless there's something else you guys want to add before we throw it to the audience.
Can I add to the comment?
Yeah,
I thought
sure.
that was a good topic. Yes, I believe it's getting there. That it's gonna MR and
That's
the way
what
the
I wanna try to
technologies will eventually come together. In the meantime, for content creators like all of us, or people that are in this business, you are looking at a piece of content or an idea or IP, and you may be creating it in parallel paths to be able to exist in all those areas. So we're doing that right now, as a lot of them are. We'll create something that might be in a tethered experience like Vive or Oculus, and it might be a big physical activation, but ultimately part of the rollout is then to do a 360 version of it and everything else. So we're now considering AR as part of that. So we may create animated characters for a VR experience, but ultimately we're using that data and all that to be able to create maybe something that's AR. So right now, they're separate little pipes. So the workaround is how do you create it with a mind's eye to an application in each of those areas. So
I think if you take gaming as an analogy there.
You want to lean into the mic?
Yep, I can do that. I think it's working.
There we go.
Working? Nope.
Yeah, I think it's working now.
Okay. In the old days, when we used to make video games, we used to port them over to each of the respective platforms, right? You never wanted to just port a game directly. And what I mean by that is a Game Boy game is a completely different experience because of the platform and the way that it's played to a PlayStation game and to a PC game. So you never do a direct port. There's no difference here. I agree 100%. You create a virtual reality experience, but you want to extend your brand and make it available across all experiences. So as augmented reality or mixed reality become more popular, etc., you also want to create experiences there, but that are very different from VR. You can't just take a VR experience and say, hey, I'm now going to turn it into a mixed reality. It doesn't work that way. You've got to it's just another platform.
There's another Mythbuster.
I thought another.
I think we should probably, if it's okay, I'd like to go ahead and just give people a chance so that you don't get completely mobbed at the end here. If somebody wants to ask a question, or not, go ahead back there. We'll start with the very, very back, and we'll work our way up. Can you speak up? It's a little noisy behind us, so. So the question is about the click-through rate and the CPA rate and how that's formulated?
Yeah, it's a great.
Yeah. Why don't you repeat his question, so.
Yeah, the question was, oh, there we go. The question was around performance advertising in VR, if I could clarify that. So that would be branding, which is things like view-through rate and click-through rate and engagement, but then there's performance advertising, which is how much did it actually cost to drive an install. So we actually see both. In this specific case for the Hawaii campaign, this is more of an engagement, more of a branding campaign, but we are working with partners like, for example, Machine Zone, who has 360 video, and if anyone knows Machine Zone, they're probably one of the most metric-driven companies out there. So it's absolutely something that we're aware of, and the entire UI and the flow, we want to make sure that we're supporting, brand advertisers and performance advertisers. And because the view-through rates and the click-through rates and the install rates are so high, the effective cost per install ends up being pretty affordable.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you for the question. Anybody else? I think you had something back there.
Yeah, how exactly do you measure engagement? Is it like a particular object in the VR that someone's eyes are looking at for certain?
The question was around gaze-through rate and what is a gaze. So unfortunately, we don't have the video, but at the end of the video, it shows that there's a landing page, and it says something like, discover Hawaii now, right? And there's a button. So since there's no clicks, we're kind of creating these standards with the users to show, how do I actually interact and how do I interact across everything. So in this case, it's a user that turns their head, faces the actual button, and a little circle forms around that. Right? Same thing with like a close button, a little circle forms around that. So this is kind of a standard that we've actually worked with the IAB on to make sure that across all networks and all advertising platforms, this is the kind of way that you would interact and kind of consider it a click.
I viewed something from Louis Vuitton, and they used it in fashion, where you could click and they're showing these dancers and everything, and you touch it and you could see what the clothing is, and you could get a little pop-up comes in, and you get to like interact with the video on your computer as long as you have the touch screen or on your mobile device. So
the devices have eye tracking, so instead of using your digits, you're using your eyeballs, and that's what is causing that click.
I would also just add that from a native advertising perspective, like product placement in VR, there's an opportunity to tag the placed products within the VR environment, and then we could do things like track how long a user was looking at a specific product, how many times they looked at it, if they engaged with it, those sort of gaze metrics as well.
So we are out of time. I want to thank you, panelists, for staying on time and on budget, so to speak, and for all of you for coming, and good luck to you. Hope to see you around the industry. The panelists will probably stick around for just a little bit, those who don't have to hop on a plane. And thank you again for coming, and good luck. Thanks.